again. Earlier, we explored how to design products that solve users' problems and give them meaningful experiences. We covered the first 3 stages of the design process: empathize, define, and ideate. Now that you've used empathy to identify and define a key user problem and ideated a solution, what's next? The prototype stage. We'll define prototypes in more detail later, but for now, you can think of a prototype as an interactive representation of your design solution. In this module, we'll transition from wireframes to low-fidelity prototypes. First, we'll create paper prototypes. Next, we'll learn from Figma about how to use their tool to create digital prototypes. Then, I'll demonstrate how to create a low-fidelity digital prototype in Figma. Finally, we'll explore ways to recognize potential bias in your designs and learn how to avoid deceptive patterns. Let's get started. By now, you may have noticed that UX design is a cycle of continuous improvement. We come up with an idea, conduct some research, and then update the idea. We're always trying to design the best user experience possible. And that takes a lot of feedback and iteration. So let's keep improving the designs we've been working on. Earlier, you learned how paper wireframes become digital wireframes. Now, we're going to check out how a digital wireframe becomes a low-fidelity prototype. Let's start with the basics. What is a prototype? A prototype is an early model of a product that demonstrates its functionality without actually building the entire product. A prototype shows stakeholders and your potential users what your design idea can do. Users can interact with the prototype and provide feedback before your team invests a significant amount of time and money. So how does a wireframe become a low-fidelity prototype? To understand the transition, you first need to know what a low-fidelity prototype is. We compared low-fidelity and high-fidelity design in an earlier video. As a reminder, in UX, fidelity means how closely a design matches the look and feel of the final product. So a low-fidelity prototype is a simple interactive model that provides a basic idea of what the product would look like. The goal is to make your designs testable so that you can collect and analyze feedback early on. As we transition from a wireframe to a low-fidelity prototype, the biggest difference is the interactivity or the ability to click from one screen to another. A low-fidelity prototype can be on paper or digital. For a paper low-fidelity prototype, interactivity might be a human acting as a computer and manually changing the design in real time. For a digital low-fidelity prototype, interactivity might be connected wireframes, where you can click on a certain part of the wireframe, like a submit button, and be taken to the next wireframe. Later, we'll make a high-fidelity prototype, but to get there, we need to build a low-fidelity prototype first. All right, now you know the differences between a wireframe and a low-fidelity prototype. Up next, we'll see this transition in action and build a paper prototype. Hi there. The time has come to transition from wireframes to prototypes. We'll start with building paper prototypes, so let's get cooking. You might be wondering, why would I want to build a paper prototype? First, paper prototypes are inexpensive. All you need is a pen and paper. Second, paper prototypes allow for rapid iteration. Because you're only using pen and paper, you can whip up paper prototypes for lots of different ideas quickly. Third, building paper prototypes is low commitment. Digital prototypes take a while to make, so it can be painful if you need to totally scrap them. But paper prototypes can be made quickly, so it doesn't burn so badly if they need to be trashed. Fourth, paper prototypes encourage honest feedback. Paper prototypes are less polished, which makes your teammates and users feel more comfortable criticizing them. Finally, building paper prototypes is a collaborative activity. There can never be too many cooks in the kitchen. For example, different members of your team could each quickly sketch their own prototype for a specific page of an app. There are, of course, some drawbacks to paper prototypes. It can be hard to interpret a paper prototype. It requires a lot of imagination for users who are testing a paper prototype to picture what the real product will actually look like. It's like a list of recipes without any images. In addition, paper prototypes can only be tested in person. You need to bring the paper prototype to the testing location, and a person has to act as a computer to manually change the design in real time. Think of it this way: you can't taste a cake over a computer. Lastly, paper prototypes are difficult to create with a remote team. Imagine trying to make a cake when paper prototypes are difficult to create with a remote team. Imagine trying to make a cake when the baker and the decorator are in different countries. Because paper prototyping is so hands-on, collaboration is best for this activity when you're together in person. With all this in mind, when is building paper prototypes useful? Well, paper prototypes are great to make during brainstorming sessions. You can quickly draw multiple ideas and compare those ideas. You might also want to build a paper prototype to test your early product idea with users. One more thing. It's important to point out that designers can take a number of different paths when creating wireframes and prototypes. For example, once you've completed your paper wireframe, you might discover that going straight to a lo-fi digital prototype works best for you. Or sometimes, you might not use paper at all and build everything digitally, like if your app or website is already well established. It all depends on what type of project you're working on and what works best for you and your team. Alright, it's time to start cooking. Let's make our first paper prototype. For this example, we'll build a paper prototype for a dog walking app. Remember the wireframe for the homepage that I made earlier? While you were making your own wireframes, I also made wireframes for the rest of the dog walking app, the user profile page, the scheduling page, and the checkout. Let's test one of these wireframes out. Since we sketched a schedule button on the homepage, let's find out what happens when we give it a tap. Absolutely nothing. So how do we take this wireframe and turn it into an interactive, low-fidelity prototype? Well, it's time to get crafty. To make our prototype interactive, I'll grab a pair of scissors and cut out every screen, like this. To save time, I'll borrow a trick from popular cooking shows. And voila! We have our cutouts. But wait, there's more. We also need the outline of a mobile phone that the screens will fit inside of. Let me see if I have one in here. Oh yes, here we go. Now that we have our screens and mobile phone outline, how do we make them interactive? First, think about the order that a user will experience each of the screens you've drawn. That's the order we should lay them out in. Let's start with the home page. since that's where our users will enter the app. I'll place the screen with the home page here. Next, I'll place the schedule screen to the right of the home page where users can select a date and time for the dog walker to visit. To the right of the schedule screen, I'll place a screen with the list of available dog walkers on this date and time. To the right of this screen, I'll place the dog walker profile page with a book button. To the right of the profile page, I'll place the booking confirmation page. We might also want to consider what happens when a user visits the app to edit their profile. They wouldn't go through the flow we just discussed, so instead we'll place that screen to the left of the home page. To make our prototype interactive, let's imagine a user wants to schedule a dog walker on the 11th of the month at 5 p.m. Let's use the mobile phone outline to simulate how the user moves through the app. This will require some imagination. The user opens the app and starts on the home page. They tap the schedule button and are brought to the schedule screen where they can select a date and time for the dog walker to come to their home. Next, the user selects a date and a time and presses the book button. They're brought to a screen with a list of available dog walkers on the date and time they selected. To select a dog walker, the user taps on the dog walker's profile. This takes the user to the dog walker profile screen. Here we click Book and we'll go to the checkout screen. Then the user clicks on the Confirm button. Whoops, it looks like I forgot to make a screen for the confirmation page. This happens all the time and is the reason why we make an interactive prototype. As I'm working with paper, it's super easy to create the missing screen. Let me grab my supplies. Give me a couple seconds to draw this. I'll start with a simple rectangle for the phone outline, and then I'll add a square with an X to represent an image of a selected dog walker, and add a few lines below the image to indicate the confirmation text. Now let me quickly cut this out. There we go. I can now finish the user's journey through the app. And there you have it, a paper prototype. If you want to make your paper prototype a fancier dish, you can add a scrolling element to the mix. Let me see if I have one in my picnic basket that I can show you. Aha! Here we go. This paper is another version of the available dog walker screen that I made earlier. It's a long list of many dog walkers, which is what a user would likely experience in the real app. To simulate how a user scrolls, we place the mobile phone outline at the top of the screen. I'll hold down the mobile phone outline and slowly scroll through the long screen using my finger. And there you go. You've just learned how to turn a paper wireframe into a lo-fi paper prototype. Awesome job! Before we come to a close, it's time for a little pop quiz. Why do you think we decided to design for mobile as the first step? Because it's the smallest space our designs might appear in. If our design works well on the limited screen of a mobile device, there's a good chance they'll fit on a larger interface like a computer monitor too. One other thing to keep in mind when deciding whether to design for mobile or desktop is what's best for the product and business. Either way, you can create paper prototypes like we did here. Coming up, we'll check out how the wireframe to prototype transition works on a digital level. Hi there! Now that you have a paper prototype, it's time to transition it into a digital one to get a feel for how the final product will operate. Revisiting the UX design application, Figma, we will make our paper prototype come to life. This will be similar to when we explored converting a paper wireframe into a digital wireframe using the same application. Remember, Figma is considered an all-in-one tool. It provides both design and prototype capabilities. You'll notice that your prototypes will look different than the ones in the upcoming videos. That's okay. You are currently working on simple lo-fi prototypes, and the ones you'll see in the next video are more complex, high-fidelity prototypes. As we mentioned before, we'll explore hi-fi prototypes later on. Just keep in mind that the tools we'll explore can be used for both low-fidelity and high-fidelity designs. Many of the skills we'll learn to build a digital prototype are transferable to other UX design applications like Adobe XD or Sketch. Once we finish exploring Figma's prototype tools, we'll discover what makes lo-fi prototypes different from hi-fi prototypes and how they are similar. I'll see you again soon. Hello again! Now that you have some experience with digital wireframing in Figma and lo-fi paper prototyping, you're ready to start experimenting with some lo-fi digital prototyping. In this video, we'll review the differences between wireframing and prototyping. Then, I'll demonstrate how to create a digital prototype in Figma based on wireframes. Remember, wireframes are used to establish an overall structure of the design. In both paper and digital wireframes, you draw each screen a user might experience on a device, like a home page or user profile page. With prototypes, however, the focus is on understanding how users interact with the design. In other words, the user needs to know what happens when they press a button or tap a menu. So let's pull up the wireframes for the dog walking app that I created earlier. Last time I demonstrated something in Figma, I created a wireframe for the homepage. While you were working on your own project, I went ahead and created the rest of the digital wireframes for the screens I drew on paper. Now we have the homepage from earlier, the schedule page with a date and time, the list of available dog walkers, the dog walker profile page, and the booking confirmation page. You probably noticed that the dog walker's search results page is a lot longer than the others. This is intentional. In a wireframe, the long length signals that the screen will scroll. Since we'll be using these wireframes for our prototypes, having the longer screen will allow users to scroll down the screen. Figma has the capability for scrolling long screens built in, and we'll get to this in more detail later. So, to make these wireframes into a low-fidelity prototype, we need to show how the user navigates the app from one screen to the next. In a paper prototype, I moved the phone outline to show how the user would navigate from screen to screen. You might also draw lines to show this movement or cut out the screens and stack them. But in a digital low-fidelity prototype, your designs are interactive and mimic the real-life navigation between screens. For example, on the homepage, what happens when a user taps the schedule button or clicks the image carousel? Each scenario needs to be accounted for. In a digital low-fidelity prototype, users should be able to click a button and be taken to the correct screen. So let's do that now. The first thing we need to do is label these wireframes. It'll make it a lot easier for us to refer to each screen by number and name. Plus, it clarifies the page's intentions. I've already labeled these wireframes, but here's how you would do it. So I'll click on the frame and go to the Layers panel and change the name. Number 1 is the home page. And I'll do the same with the rest of the screens. Number 2 is Schedule page. Number 3 is the list of available dog walkers. Then we have number 4, dog walker profile page. And finally, number 5, booking confirmation page. Okay, great. Now we're ready to prototype. The first thing we need to do is change from the Design tab to the Prototype tab. This changes the options for what we can do with each of our wireframe screens. Now, when I hover over or select the element in the wireframes, notice how a little circle with a plus sign appears on the right side of the element? This is a connection node, and it indicates where a prototype connection can begin. So for example, what do I want to happen when the Schedule button is tapped? I want users to go from the home page to the scheduling page, right? So I'll click on the connection node and drag the arrow, and a connection arrow appears. We can drag this arrow from the Schedule button on the home page to the scheduling wireframe, which is our desired destination here. When we release the click, there's a connection between the two elements. Now, on the scheduling page, users can pretend to enter the date and time they need a dog walker. When they're done, they'll click the Submit button. So I'll connect Submit to the next screen. I'll click on the node and drag the connection arrow from the Submit button to the next wireframe, which is the list of available dog walkers. Okay, let's assume that the user is interested in this first dog walker. So they click Learn More. This button takes them to the dog walker's profile page, right? So I'll connect those two. Perfect. Now the user is read up on the dog walker and is ready to book. When they click Book, they're taken to this final confirmation page. I'll add this connection arrow too. Yay, I've created a usable prototype. Let's see it in action. To do this, let's go into Presentation View by clicking the Play button in the upper right corner of the toolbar. Here's my prototype. Now, I'll follow all the steps I just outlined to make sure the prototype works. First, I'll click the Schedule button on the home page. Then, I'll schedule a date and time and click Submit. Here's the list of available dog walkers. Notice how it scrolls to show users all the dog walkers. Pretty cool, right? Okay, next in the user journey, I'll choose to learn more about a dog walker. And I'm taken to the dog walker profile page. Finally, I'll book the service. Here I am on the confirmation page. It seems like I created a usable transaction. It may seem like we're done with the prototype, but there's still more to test. I'll play the prototype again and choose a different dog walker from the list of results. What happens when I click Learn More under dog walker number 3? Nothing. So I need to fix that. I'm going to connect all of these Learn More buttons to our profile page for Jane Doe, since that's the only profile we'll use for this low-fidelity prototype. This way, no matter which Learn More button a user selects, they're taken to this example profile page. You could make several profiles for your prototype if you'd like, but I'm keeping it simpler here to save time. Okay, what are we missing on the profile page? I've already connected the Book button to the confirmation page. These other squares are placeholders for images, so I won't worry about those yet. Look at the bar at the top of the screen. See this left-facing arrow? What should happen with this? When users click it, they should go back to the previous page, right? So I'll connect the back button with the previous screen, the list of available dog walkers. Perfect. Now I'll do the same with the rest of the back buttons. They should each be connected to the previous screen. One more thing. Let's revisit the schedule page. Here on the screen, there's another place a user might click the Cancel button. The Cancel button should take the user back to the home page, so I'll make that connection. Now that we're on the home page, there are more places the user might click. What happens when a user clicks on the profile icon in the bar at the top of the app? Well, nothing yet, but it should take users to a user profile page. And we're in luck, because it just so happens that I've already created that wireframe. Let's check it out. When I want to view a different part of the file, I just hold down the space bar and click on the page to pan around. Great. Here's the wireframe I've drawn up for this profile page. Eventually, on this page, the user can edit their personal details. I'll connect the profile icon to the profile page. Now, I'll connect this page to the home page using the back arrow up at the top. Okay, so I'm back on the home page. Next, what should happen when the user clicks this headline in the image carousel? It should take them to a list of dog training tips, but right now nothing happens because we haven't created this screen or connected it. This is an entirely different journey for the user. Instead of booking a dog walker, they're reading content, so I need to account for that by providing a screen for the articles. Let me show you how quickly I can create a new screen in Figma. There we go. I have a totally new page to count for this user journey. Remember, now I need to add a connection arrow to the carousel on the home page. Great. Now when the user or usability study participant interacts with the home page, they have more than one option for where to go. I'll play our prototype one more time and see how I've improved it. Here I am on the home page again. I've already tested the schedule button, so I'll check our new connections. I'll click the headline here. I'm on the article page. Nice. Now I'll go back. And I'll check the profile icon. It works. Next, I'll go through our main transaction again and schedule a dog walker. Let's say I need to cancel. Great, that's working. One more time. Okay, on this dog walker search results page, remember how I tried to click the Learn More button on a profile other than the first one and that link didn't work? I'll give that another try. This time, I'll scroll to the bottom and learn more about this person. Nice, it went to our example of a dog walker's profile. Okay, I'll book a dog walker and complete the user journey. I did it. So there you have it. That's how to build a lo-fi prototype in Figma. But there are lots of moving parts to a prototype. We haven't added images or text or color into the equation, so there's a lot left to do to upgrade this low-fidelity prototype to a high-fidelity prototype and ultimately create a usable app. Coming up, you'll learn more about the differences between lo-fi and hi-fi prototyping. You'll even have the chance to show what you've learned by building your own prototype. Keep up the great work.
In the last video of our Figma for Beginners series, we created a single screen of our app. To save time, we've built out the other screens in our application, including a menu, profile, and interface for searching the app. Let's create an interactive prototype to put it all together. Prototypes are a great way for us to visualize how our final app will look. They let us define pathways, explore interactions, and test out ideas before we invest in building the real thing. We can create multiple prototypes within a file and keep them organized on different pages. Let's duplicate the page of our existing designs to get started. Click on the Prototype tab in the right sidebar to switch to prototype mode. Here, we create connections between frames so users can navigate the prototype like a real application. Prototype connections are made up of 3 parts: a hotspot where the connection begins, the connection itself which stores the interaction details, and the destination. We want to create an interaction from the menu icon to the menu page. Because the menu icon is nested, we need to double-click it to select it. Once the connection node appears, click the connection icon to create an arrow and drag it over to the destination frame. Release to complete the connection. Let's create an interaction from the menu back to the home page. select the Home text layer, click Add Connection icon, and then drag the arrow back to the home page. Currently, our connection uses the default instant interaction settings. We'll cover the specifics of these interactions a little later on. Let's see how our prototype looks so far. Click the Present icon to open it in Presentation View. At the bottom of the page, we can see we only have 2 frames in our prototype instead of all 4. Once you add at least one prototype connection, Figma will only include frames with connections in Presentation View. If we click on the menu icon, Figma switches to the menu frame. If we click the Home option in the menu, it switches back to the home page. Great! Now that we have the basic mechanics working, we can customize the interaction. Back in the editor, we can view other aspects of the connection in the Interaction Details menu. Here, we can select a trigger for the transition, like a tap, click, or hover, as well as the action and destination. We want users to be able to access the menu from a few places in the app, so this interaction needs to feel accessible. With the default instant animation, we lose the context of where we were in the app and how we got there. Animations guide users through flows and communicate relationships between different parts of our application. There's a few ways we could tackle this problem in Figma. We could create an overlay that makes the menu appear above our other screens, or we could use Smart Animate to reveal the menu when you drag the current screen to the right. Both approaches make our menu feel easily accessible and establishes a hierarchy that positions the menu on a different level than our other screens. This also allows us to explore some of Figma's super cool prototyping features, but they take us well off the beginner's path. To explore more, search Overlays or Smart Animate in the Figma Help Center for more information. Move In animates the menu so that it appears over the top of our existing screen. We're being shown some more information, but we don't feel like we've moved to a new location. This feels like a good fit. There are some other animation types you can explore, so give them a try. The menu icon is on the left side of our screen, so our menu should move in from the left. Click the right arrow from the Interaction Details panel to set the direction. We can also set the duration to control the speed of the transition, and use easing to make the animation feel less robotic. We won't explore these settings now, but you can learn more by searching for easing in the Figma Help Center. When we return back to the home frame, the animation should be the reverse. We'll select Move Out and choose the left pointing arrow to move the menu back out. Now we have our first set of interactions. We can access the menu from both the search and profile screens, so let's create those interactions next. The Interaction Details menu shows our last animation settings. Let's update these to match the interaction. We'll repeat this process for the profile screen. We don't need to update the animation as Figma has applied the most recent one again. We'll need to create the interactions going back from the menu to the profile page, updating the animation to match. We can only access search from the home screen. We'll create a connection from the search icon that opens the search page. We'll use the push animation to make it feel like we are moving laterally between these two screens. Tapping cancel should take us back to the home page. We'll create a connection with the push animation that moves in that direction. Now that we have a working prototype, we're ready to get some feedback from our other members of the team. We can invite them to the prototype itself. We can share our prototype with our team by sending them a link. Click the Share button in the toolbar. We'll update the link sharing settings from only people invited to the file to anyone with the link and set to Can View. Perfect. Now we can click Copy Link and share this with our team. Our team avatars will show up in the toolbar as they join. We can click on someone's avatar to observe their actions as they move through the prototype. Observation mode is great when you're running a usability test. Anyone can add feedback, suggestions, or questions to prototypes using comments. Click the comment icon to access the comment tool. Now we can click on a spot in the prototype to share our thoughts. It looks like Jenny added some questions around the other pages listed in the menu. She's also pointed out that there's no way to interact with posts on the feed. Ryan made a great observation that we're missing a back icon on the menu page, which might make it easier for users to dismiss the menu. Stella loves this photo of Yuna. If we switch back to the editor and press C to select the comment tool, we can see the comments our team made on the prototype on our frames. This allows us to collect feedback in one place, incorporate advice, and resolve any outstanding comments. As Jenny mentioned, we want a way for our users to interact with our posts. Let's add some icons to allow users to like, comment, and bookmark posts. let's go to the Components page. Here's some components we created earlier. We've placed them in a horizontal auto layout frame and made them into a component. We can then place an instance of this component inside of our post component. When we switch back to our prototype, we can see the changes we made to the main component reflected in our instances. And because we built our feed using auto layout, our posts have adjusted accordingly. We'll finish up by incorporating Ryan's feedback. We'll drag a back icon from the Assets panel into our menu frame. We'll then switch to the Prototype tab and add an interaction to this icon. We'll also update the action to back. Users can access the menu from any page. The back action allows us to automatically return users to the previous page without having to create separate connections. We did it! We built an interactive prototype of our designs, explored animations, and incorporated feedback from our design team. In our next video, we'll prepare our file for sharing assets with our writers and developers. We'll explore creating thumbnails, navigating the file as a viewer, copying code from the Inspect panel, and exporting assets for production.
Hi there, it's me, Karen, again. As you might remember from our earlier course on UX research, everyone is influenced by their personal biases. When bias creeps into UX research, you might move forward with a product that doesn't address the user's real pain points. UX designers can also be affected by implicit bias, so we need to be aware of how our own points of view can alter our designs, influence users, and affect society. In this video, you'll learn how to recognize bias and how to consciously avoid its impact on your designs. One of the most common biases affecting designers is implicit bias. As a refresher, implicit biases are the collection of attitudes and stereotypes we associate with people without our conscious knowledge. Whether positive or negative, these biases can unconsciously be mistaken for truth when in reality they aren't. Implicit bias can have detrimental effects on those who are the subject of the bias. For example, let's say that a restaurant manager is looking to hire a new employee. The manager has two applicants. One is a 22-year-old with no restaurant experience. The other is a 53-year-old with over 30 years of experience working in the food and beverage industry. If the restaurant manager has an implicit bias that people above the age of 50 are easily overwhelmed or move slower than younger people, they might overlook the older applicant without reviewing the applicant's experience. This is an implicit bias against the older applicant. Age alone doesn't speak to someone's behaviors, actions, or abilities. Biases like this can result in qualified people not being hired or even being terminated unfairly. Implicit biases often find their way into the UX design development process. For example, imagine you're designing a map application for New York City. Because your implicit bias is that people walk as a primary form of transportation, the directions in your app assume the user is walking. This means your app will give map routes following sidewalks and passing through green spaces. But your implicit bias is flawed. While many New Yorkers walk to work, millions of New Yorkers use the subway, take the bus, ride in cabs, drive and bike. You wouldn't want your app to direct someone in a car through a green space because you assume they'd be walking. More importantly, many people are unable to walk. So your implicit bias that all New Yorkers walk ignores ability as a constraining factor. Someone relying on public transportation would need directions to the nearest subway or bus stop. And someone in a wheelchair might not be able to access a subway station. For example, only 1 in 4 subway stations in Manhattan, a borough of New York City, are wheelchair accessible. In this case, our bias about New Yorkers prevents us from creating a product that truly serves all our users. Implicit bias is just one reason why creating and following personas in user journey maps is so important. To refresh your memory, a persona is a fictional user whose goals and characteristics represents the needs of a larger group of users. And the user journey is their path to the product, meaning what the user's needs are and how the product can solve those needs. When creating personas, UX designers need to be as inclusive as possible. We shouldn't assume that a certain ethnicity, gender, age, ability, or socioeconomic group is or isn't part of our audience. Users can be complex human beings with many unique qualities and distinct needs. User research helps us avoid assumptions about who our users are. Instead, research helps us better understand users and give them what they need. For example, imagine you're designing an app to help parents find childcare. To personalize your onboarding process, you start by showing the message, "Welcome, moms! We're here to help you find the right babysitter for your little one." You might have thought that by addressing users directly as moms, you were humanizing the experience. But there's something wrong with this message. It immediately excludes every other type of caregiver, like grandparents, guardians, dads, and others. Implicit bias like this leaves out important users, which is bad for business. Addressing users this way also reinforces the stereotype that moms are in charge of figuring out childcare, and it presumes that every child has a mother. Being aware of your implicit biases and combating stereotypes is important work. By creating inclusive user experiences, designers help build a more equitable society. Okay, now you know how implicit bias can affect your role as a UX designer. There are more biases we'll cover in the course readings. Coming up, we'll discuss another ethical issue in UX design called deceptive patterns. See you there!
Hey, my name is Ayan, and I am a visual designer at Google. So what that really means is that I'm responsible for, in some ways, making sure that products are beautiful, but in a lot of other ways, making sure that they're cohesive. A visual designer is responsible for picking out the typography, making sure that the brand is properly articulated in the user experience, and for working really closely with the engineers to ensure that the experience is the same as it is in the mocks as it is on the phone when you're actually using it as a person in your everyday life. So how bias impacts my job, I would say that this is kind of a day-to-day reality for many women of color in tech. To be honest, there are a very small amount of us here. And so what that actually means in my job, a big part of a visual designer's job is to take stakeholders along the journey. As we're pitching new brand ideas, it's really difficult to make something that isn't very tangible, like aesthetics, and translate it into something that could really help the product succeed, right? And so As I'm presenting, I'm aware of my identity and I make sure that I really can present my ideas well. I articulate my stories in a way that everyone can kind of understand what I'm saying and really buy into the concepts that we're pitching. What I would like to see in tech is just more women of color in these spaces. Um, I'd really like for less women to have the experience that I did, which is to be an only. To not be surrounded by folks that look like you can be a bit isolating. And I think about integration and being able to bring your truest self to work. Women of color shouldn't have to be exhausted by code switching. What I would say is, please come and join us. More women of color in tech would really not only benefit folks like myself, but also in product. When we are building products, we think of ourselves within them. And so if there aren't any women of color building the latest search algorithm, we may not be considered within their use cases. It's a lot easier to consider someone an edge case when they're not in the room.